During my mother's funeral, the house was filled with mourners, quiet sobs, and the scent of incense. It was a painful day, one I had dreaded but had braced myself for. My husband Brian stood by me, offering tissues, guiding relatives to their seats, and whispering small reassurances like, "Are you holding up?" His support kept me grounded. But the fragile calm was shattered when my mother-in-law, Sandra, arrived. She greeted me with a bright smile that felt strangely out of place amid the grief. At first, I assumed it was her way of masking discomfort in such a solemn setting, but I soon realized it was something else entirely. After a few pleasantries, she began circling the house, almost like a guest inspecting real estate. "This house is wonderful," she remarked with an airy laugh, running her hand along the furniture. "So much space, such character. My son is very lucky." I blinked at her, unsure how to respond. "This was my parents' home," I said softly, the lump in my throat tightening. Yes, of course," she waved dismissively. Then her eyes swept toward one of the bedrooms, and with a mischievous smile, she added, "I wonder if this room would be suitable for me." Her tone was casual, but her words hit me like ice water. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. "Excuse me?" I asked. She chuckled as if it were obvious. "Well, since you're married to my son, everything you have is essentially his too, isn't it? Which means, in a way, this house belongs to Brian, and if it belongs to Brian," she placed a hand over her chest, "then it belongs to us." My grief tightened into anger. "Sandra, with respect, this house is my inheritance. It stays with me." She didn't even flinch. Instead, she leaned closer, smiling sweetly as though offering a favor. "From now on, we should get along better. I think it'll be lovely when we move in together. Don't you agree?" Her words hollowed me out. I wanted to scream. This is not the time. My mother's body had barely been laid to rest, and here she was planning her new room. The walls of my childhood home, sacred with memories of my parents, suddenly felt under siege. Before I could respond, Brian appeared, his expression dark. "Mom, what are you saying? This isn't the time or the place," he said firmly. Sandra's cheerful mask cracked into irritation. "Oh, don't make such a fuss. I was only being practical." "Practical?" Brian's voice rose. "She just lost her mother, and you're talking about moving in?" He guided her toward the door, his jaw tight with anger. "Please, just leave, we'll talk later." She huffed but complied, muttering something under her breath. Brian turned back to me with a guilty look. "I'm sorry, she can be unreasonable." I forced a weak smile. "Thank you for handling it." But the seed had been planted. 12 days later, the funeral over and the mourners gone, Brian and I sat in our cramped apartment. Piles of paperwork and condolence letters still cluttered the table. I finally voiced what I'd been holding in. "This place feels too small now," I admitted. "We should consider moving into my parents' house. It has the space, and honestly, it feels right." Brian nodded thoughtfully. "I agree, it's a better environment if we're thinking about having kids too." His agreement reassured me, until he hesitated, fiddling with his hands. "Well then, we should start preparing for the move," he said, but then added cautiously, "and maybe my parents could come live with us, considering the space." The words slammed into me. My heart sank. "Are you suggesting cohabitation?" I asked carefully. He avoided my gaze. "It's just, with Dad's health declining, Mom's under a lot of pressure, and there are so many empty rooms in the house." I felt a sharp pang of betrayal. "Brian, we agreed before marriage we wouldn't live together with your parents. Did you forget?" He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "No, I didn't forget, but Mom keeps bringing it up. I thought maybe we could reconsider now that circumstances are different." "Different?" My voice trembled with anger. "You saw how she acted at the funeral. She walked through my home as if she owned it and picked out a room like it was hers, and you think I should welcome her in?" He tried to calm me. "She didn't mean it that way. She can be tactless." "Tactless?" I repeated, nearly laughing at the understatement. "She disrespected my parents' memory." "Brian, this house is not just walls and rooms, it's everything my father worked for, everything my mother preserved, and you want me to hand it over to her?" He looked torn, caught between loyalty to his mother and promises to me. "I'm not saying hand it over, I'm just saying, maybe compromise." "No," I said firmly, my voice shaking but resolute. "I will not live with someone who tried to stake a claim on my parents' house during my mother's funeral." The silence between us stretched, heavy and suffocating. For the first time since we married, I wondered if Brian truly understood how much this house meant to me, or if he was simply too afraid of displeasing his mother to stand beside me. I had reiterated my refusal to cohabitate several times, always making sure to be clear and respectful. I explained that my husband's mobility issues alone made it difficult for me to manage even our small household, and adding 2 more people, especially ones with health needs, would overwhelm me. But my mother-in-law never saw it that way. "You're abandoning us," she accused one evening over the phone, her voice sharp. I took a deep breath and tried to remain calm. "I'm not abandoning anyone, Sandra. I've explained this before, we discussed it before Brian and I even got married. I sympathize with father's declining health, truly I do, but I can't carry the burden of everyone's care, it's not sustainable." To her, my practical reasons sounded like excuses. To me, they were the line between survival and collapse. I added one final point: if cohabitation were ever to be considered, your attitude and Brian's attitude toward my needs would have to change. Respecting boundaries is non-negotiable. Her answer was to scoff. "Heartless," she muttered, and then hung up. A few days later, I came home to find Brian dragging furniture around the living room. At first, I thought it was a half-hearted attempt at spring cleaning. Curious, I asked, "What are you doing? Are you clearing space for moving boxes?" Without looking up, he replied, "No, I'm planning to make space for 2 beds here." The words froze me in place. 2 beds, my voice faltered. He finally stopped, resting his hands on the couch. "Yes, my parents are moving in today." For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. My chest tightened. "Moving in, today? Brian, we discussed this. I told you I couldn't live with your parents. They had to move out of their apartment," he explained quickly, almost defensively. "Their lease is up. Rather than renew it, we thought it would be better if they stayed here. It'll be cramped for now, but once we move to your parents' house, there'll be plenty of space." I shook my head in disbelief. "This isn't what we agreed to. Why is cohabitation even on the table? I told you before, I will not live with someone who barged into my mother's funeral and claimed a room in my house like it was hers." Brian tried to soften his tone. "I'll talk to Mom, but we'll be living together from now on, so please, just try to get along." The words stung. "Why do you prioritize everything your mom says?" "I don't," he argued. "I listen to both of you and make judgments." But his actions spoke differently. When it came to his mother, he always bent, always justified her behavior. Alone, he was kind and thoughtful, but with her influence, he became someone else, someone I could barely recognize. That very evening, we welcomed his parents into our already cramped apartment. Frank, my father-in-law, greeted me politely enough, but it didn't take long for me to realize that he rarely spoke his own mind. He simply echoed whatever Sandra said. Sandra, on the other hand, wasted no time voicing her dissatisfaction. "It's awfully small in here," she muttered, wrinkling her nose. I forced a smile. "I'm sorry it feels cramped. We'll manage until we can move to a bigger place." She said nothing more, but the look on her face made it clear, she wasn't the least bit grateful. The very next day, she handed me a slip of paper. "Go out and buy me this medicated patch. The pharmacy on Main Street should have it." It was a small request, nothing monumental, but it piled onto the frustration that had been gnawing at me since they walked through the door. And then, as the days passed, Sandra's excitement about the big move only grew. She spoke often of my parents' house as if it were already hers, her voice animated as she fantasized about which room would be most suitable. Every word was a dagger to my chest. After about 12 silent, suffocating days, I made my decision. I went to the courthouse, filed the paperwork, and officially renounced my inheritance. The house, the one place I had fought so hard to protect, would not fall into Sandra's hands, not while I had a say. When I told them, Sandra's reaction was immediate. "What madness possessed you?" she shrieked. "If you didn't want the house, you could have sold it for a fortune. Why just throw it away?" I answered calmly, "Because if I sold it, you'd find a way to rely on that money too. I thought it would be clearer if I simply had nothing to do with it." Her face reddened with fury. "We left our apartment for this. How do you plan to make it up to us?" "I've been clear all along," I replied. "I never agreed to cohabitation. You forced this situation without my consent, so I took my stand." The words seemed to drain the room of air. Brian sat pale and speechless, Frank blinked in confusion, and Sandra trembled with rage. Finally, I turned to my husband. My voice was steady. Brian, I've been thinking about divorce. What do you think? His mouth opened, then closed again. Divorce? Sandra didn't hesitate. Brian, divorce this ridiculous wife immediately, she demanded. Her venom didn't surprise me, but I had hoped, deep down, that Brian would resist her this once, that he would fight for me. Instead, he stammered, well, you seem to want a divorce too, and maybe that's for the best. Even in this critical moment, he couldn't make a choice without leaning on his mother's will. Fine, I said, my heart breaking but resolute, let's proceed with the divorce. That night, I packed only the essentials and moved into a budget hotel. The next day, I took leave from work and went back to the courthouse. A few days later, Sandra called, her voice shrill with panic. What is going on? We just heard that the house is being listed under your name again. What trick are you playing? Yes, the house is mine, I said simply. You forged the papers, didn't you? She snapped. Why would I forge documents for court submission? I replied, they're genuine. Then why is it yours? You said you renounced it. I filed for renunciation, I explained, but the process takes nearly a month. Until then, it can be withdrawn. I withdrew it. Her voice faltered. You lied to us? I needed to see where everyone stood, I admitted. If Brian had shown even the slightest desire to keep our marriage, I would have reconsidered, but he didn't. Sandra grasped for another angle. Then during the divorce, the property will be divided. It's marital property, isn't it? No, I said firmly. Inherited property is exempt from division. This house is mine alone, and since our marriage lasted only a few years, there's even less ground for your argument. Her rage was palpable through the phone. Selfish, heartless woman. Call me whatever you like, I replied, my tone calm but cold. This house carries my parents' memory. I will not let people who disrespected them live here. If you have more complaints, take it up with a lawyer. The divorce was finalized soon after, pushed along quickly, no doubt at Sandra's urging, and just like that, I was free. Sandra and Frank remained with Brian in the cramped apartment. I heard later that they eventually managed to move into a small rental house, a downgrade from their expectations. Sandra had once envisioned strolling through my father's home as the new mistress of the estate. Instead, she was left with far less than what she had hoped. As for me, I returned to my parents' home. The air felt lighter there, the rooms warm and familiar. I could almost sense my parents' presence, quiet, comforting, protective. I had fought for this house not just as property, but as memory, as legacy, as love, and now, finally, it was mine to keep, untouched, untainted, and safe. A new beginning had arrived, one rooted not in bitterness but in peace.